In the gospel reading today, our Lord is asked about the question of divorce. Is it okay to get a divorce? We look at that question today in America, where the divorce rate is nearly 60%. We say, we've got a problem. Now, I know for most of you who are married, if I asked you what's the problem in your marriage, the answer will be your spouse. But that's not quite the issue that I was talking about. What is the problem? It can be summed up in one word: selfishness. That's the problem in marriage today. It's the problem in our society. And so it has affected marriage in a particularly profound way. So we need to look at that question and ask ourselves, what is it that this is about? Why is the selfishness so problematic in a marriage? First of all, we have to understand the dignity, the immense dignity that God has called a married person to. When we look at the first reading, right before this reading, we have been told that God created us in his own image and likeness. God is a trinity of persons, but he is one. Creation is an expression of the Lord. There are different aspects of creation that are going to show different ways of the glory of God. And the call to holy matrimony is one of those. In fact, the most profound. Because God, being three persons but one God, has now called on a human level two persons to be united as one. The Lord makes that very clear. He made it very clear right from the Garden of Eden. And Jesus reiterates it. They are no longer two, but one flesh. There is an imitation of the Trinity that is there. But it's even more than just that, because for those of you who are married, you didn't put yourselves together. You can't. I like to say sometimes to the young couples getting married, you could stand on opposite sides of the sanctuary and run at one another and smash into each other. You still can't make the two of you one. You might be a bloody mess on the floor, but you're not one. God himself created you as two separate individuals. Only God can recreate you to be one. You are still two persons, but you are one reality. And it is God who does it. So therefore, just as it is with the Trinity that there are three who are one, so in marriage, there are two human persons and God. There are three to make one new reality. In that, there is to be an imitation then of everything of the Trinity. We look, for instance, at the nature of love, because when we ask ourselves, what is the Trinity? God is love. The three persons of the Trinity love one another perfectly, and they receive the love of the others perfectly. But love knows no bounds. There is nothing that we can say it will be within these boundaries. Love always transcends any kind of boundary we can put on it. And so the love of God overflows. And you and I are the overflow of the love of God. Persons made in the image and likeness of God. At the same time, as is obvious, we are made in the image and likeness of our parents. Consequently, when we look at it from that perspective, children are the overflow of the love of their parents, and they are the overflow of the love of God. St. Paul kind of mentions this in the second reading. He said, he who consecrates and those who are consecrated all have one origin. Therefore, he is not ashamed to call them brothers. We have the same origin. Our soul came from God. Our bodies come from our human parents. We have one origin. Jesus, who is God, took a human nature. We who are human have been made partakers of the divine nature. We have one origin. And therefore we are to act in a divine way. We are to do what God does. And that's precisely why when a couple gets married, the vow is that they will love one another. Now, we in America have really messed up the concept of love. I'm amazed at young people today who talk to me about the fact that love is saying something nice about somebody. If I say, you did a good job writing this paper, oh, that's giving you love. No, it's not. But the same thing happens if I say to somebody, they really messed up. Whoa, what's all the hate? It's like, there was no hate. All I said is, you didn't do a good job on this. Has nothing to do with hate, nor does saying you did a good job on this have anything to do with love. We've made love not only that, but previous to that, we've just made it an emotion. Oh, but we're so in love. We have these gushy feelings. That's cute. It's not love. The emotions come with love, but the emotion isn't love. What is love? Love is a sacrifice. Love is serving. Love is dying to yourself in order to live for another. When we look again at the second reading, St. Paul talks about the fact that it was fitting that when bringing many children to glory, that God should make the leader in the work of salvation perfect through suffering. Interesting concept, because love requires suffering. It is not always fun. It is not always easy, as any married couple knows. Married life is beautiful and glorious as it is, also comes with an awful lot of suffering. But that's exactly what Jesus has shown us. 1,600 years ago, St. Augustine talked about this mystery of Christ. And he said, Jesus consummated his marriage with his bride, the church, on the marriage bed of the cross. So what does love look like? Just like that. What does married love look like? Look at the crucifix. God has called married people to the most profound love, to the most profound kind of union with himself. He has shown us what it means. In the midst of the suffering, it's easy for us to want to run away. But St. Paul talks about the suffering of Jesus and what it's about. Not just about bringing us to salvation, but when we look at his letter to the Ephesians, he talks about the fact that the suffering of Jesus was for his bride. To present to himself a bride that is pure and spotless, without wrinkle or any sort of imperfection. That's what the suffering is about. It is to make you saints. It is to help one another to become saints. It is to die to yourself and live for the other. So the suffering isn't just empty and worthless. The suffering is what allows the love to grow. That's where the love is perfected. That's what it is that a couple has vowed on the day that they get married. And we look even further. We say that with marriage, there is this expression then of the Trinity, but as we see, there's also that expression of the union of Christ and his church. The two are one. And we look at that and we say, how does a married couple express that unity? And Jesus tells us exactly how it happens. The two become one flesh, he says. The ring on your finger is not the actual sign of your sacrament. It is the union of the couple that is the sign of your sacrament. That is holy. Our society has denigrated that. And worse than that, it brings it right back to pure selfishness. It's what I can get from you. I want my pleasure. That's not what it's about. When you make your vows on the day of your marriage, you give yourself away. Marriage is not a 50-50 deal. Marriage is a 100-100 deal. You have given yourself entirely to the other, and you receive from the other their gift of self. And that is expressed in that intimate union of a couple. So we need again to consider that point. If we were to look, for instance, at what's going on in our society with contraception and sterilization, it destroys a marriage because it destroys the very sign of the marriage. You have to ask yourself the simple question, what does it say about what I think regarding my marriage if the very expression of my marriage is something that I now have made selfish? It's no longer an act of love. It's no longer an act of self-giving, but it's one of taking from my spouse, which is a point of using the person, not loving the person. Yes, in a marriage there is going to be an awful lot that you will gain. But you gain it as a gift. You receive that from your spouse. You do not take it from your spouse, because you have given yourself away and your spouse has given himself or herself to you. Think about this another way. The two sacraments that are most closely aligned symbolically, in fact, the symbolism is identical, is marriage and the Eucharist. They're on two completely different levels, obviously, but the symbolism is the same. In the Eucharist, Jesus gives himself 100% to us. It is a self-sacrifice. It is the cross. All the things that we've already mentioned about marriage. So when you think about what Jesus is doing for us in the Eucharist, and think about this as you come forward to receive Holy Communion today, what is he doing? He's giving himself to you as a gift. And then what is our response? We are to receive that gift, and we are to give ourselves to him as a gift. 100%. That's what's supposed to happen in a marriage. Now, if you today, for instance, were to come to communion, and you were to receive communion, and then you went back to your pew and I was to say, well, guess what? I didn't really intend to consecrate today. Jesus wasn't there. I went through the motions, I made it look good, but it was empty. You got a piece of bread. You didn't receive Jesus, you received a piece of bread. You would be outraged, and rightly so. When contraceptives are used in a marriage, that's exactly what happens. You go through the motions, but it's empty. It's sterile. It's infertile. Nothing happens. It is fake. It is a lie. And it is a mortal sin. Every single occasion of that is a mortal sin. Love is life-giving by its very nature. And if we put something in the way so that it is no longer open to life, It's a violation of what was vowed on the day of marriage. It's a violation of the dignity of the other person because you're using the other person. It's a violation of the dignity of our reproductive faculties because we're using them in a way that was not intended by God. That's what is so important, and that is the problem in marriage. Selfishness in any form, because it violates what was vowed, and it violates the other person. So my recommendation for married couples, not only, of course, to make everything pure and proper, but I would recommend to you to renew your marriage vows. Not just every year on your anniversary, every night. When you get into bed, look at that other person in the eye and renew your vows of marriage. And think seriously about what it is that you are saying. What did I vow to God and to this other person? And then look at it and ask yourself, am I truly loving as I have vowed?